Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, whichever it might be for you. I am now going to submit my video for 1B as it pertains to the coding assignment, of which I'm doing it for interviews using a narrative analysis. I'm going to be looking at some notes that I've taken in this transcript, so I may appear a little bit stilted. In any case, I've chosen to do a narrative analysis, which is a very powerful tool used in qualitative research in the field of management science and knowledge management. The narrative analysis considers a narrative form as a non-neutral theoretical account that aims at identifying the desired communication meaning of a particular dialogue. It is usually based on questions or question to the participants from which they respond, and their dialogue is captured in a written or recorded narrative for analysis by the researcher. The narrative inquiry focuses on the organization of human knowledge more than merely the collection of processing of data. The paradigm theory of constructionists addresses the credibility, transferability, and conformability, which is central to the research study using an interview process. The narrative approach does not only capture the emotions of the moment, rendering the event in an active rather than a passive one, but the explicit and implicit knowledge and discourse meaning that is found in the response provided by the participants. Verbal expression and nonverbal expression in interview sessions are rich with factual data and tacit information. Expressions of many types are captured during interviews, coming from facial expressions, body positions, as well as voice tone and animation, enunciation, and articulation of dialogue using various vocabulary levels used by the participants. There are several narrative analysis methods which have different focuses and should be considered against the research objectives and the goals, so that the organization of the narrative responses will provide the best interpretation of knowledge acquired through the narrative responses. I have selected Bruner's functional narrative approach, which focuses on capturing narratives that come from different individuals as they respond to value statements in a survey used to determine the participants' preferred strategic information choices. Bernard, 1999. The assignment 1A I had reported on a chosen qualitative research method for a small-scale interview process completed with 3 participants in an action research method, which I intend to use in my larger thesis research study. Essentially, at first, the participants ranked on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, how capable the organization is of achieving its strategic intentions. After completing this ranking, the participants were asked individually to explain why they had made this specific ranking choice. This approach focuses on a narrative response that helps individuals make sense of their current perspective on topics compared to previously obtained qualitative and quantitative data participants provided in the survey questionnaire. For this assignment 1B, the focus is on how the narrative responses provided to the researcher were interpreted for consistency between ranking and narrative justification for the ranking for each individual, comparing those individual findings for consistency with all of the other responses. Patterns of agreement emerged from this response analysis, as well as being able to identify similarities in vocabulary communication patterns of expressions between them. Elements of inconsistency were also identified between ranking and narrative justifications of the ranking for individual participants, as well as comparisons between the individuals. Given the assessment findings were graphically produced to show the level of coherence or agreement on selected strategic capabilities, there was considerable agreement on the level of low preparedness for the organization between the participants. Through discussion It was also established that the findings were credible, yet disturbing to the participants based on what they now thought would be the most desired levels of coherency for the strategic capabilities to effectively achieve their strategic intentions. Based on this disconcerting evidence or reaction by the participants, there was a substantial interest in graphically expressing what the participants thought would be the most preferred level of coherency for achieving their strategic intentions. An additional graphic chart was created to illustrate this preference for the participants. The qualitative analysis using narrative method has unique challenges associated with recording accurately the participants' narrative responses to the questions and further explanations justifying their response. The considerable detail amount of the narrative response challenged this researcher to consider using fewer questions that would not generate the amount of data that was generated from the 14 questions in the coherence survey. Further narrative analysis continuing in that all possible and potential interview findings have yet to be identified for reporting by this researcher using qualitative narrative inquiry process. A few more comments on the experience has to do with the initial reluctance of the participants to volunteer information on such sensitive data. After I explained to them that none of the information or data would be shared with anyone outside of themselves and myself, which is based on a reporting assignment for a class that I'm taking on qualitative assignments. After I had had that conversation, they agreed to answer the questions, and once involved in the survey ranking as well as the qualitative responses, they were very excited to explain their particular thinking on the choices they made. Now, once having reviewed the findings collectively, their reaction, as I described earlier, was quite interesting because they thought they would have a lot more coherency between the capabilities they chose as strategic imperatives for achieving strategic success. The interview process was quite comfortable for me. I enjoyed talking about these matters, given I have some great knowledge of the issues. So that concludes my report for this video.